Well, thank you, everyone. It's 7:02 p.m. I'll call this meeting back to order. We were having a glitch with our iCompass system, the system that runs our agendas and so on. That's what usually we usually pump the meetings out through YouTube using iCompass. We are now directly pushing the meetings out through YouTube, and the clerk's office will somehow marry those things together tomorrow, and so it will appear seamless. For those of you who are YouTubing in, we apologize that you weren't able to see the first half hour of our meeting. We are on 6.2 of our agenda, the statutory public meeting with regard to the Bonn Road official plan amendments, zoning bylaw amendments, and consent applications. And we have just heard from RFA planning consultants, Shawn, Lege, with regard to some background information on the proposals for 273-1008 Ontario. And now I will go back to where we were and ask if there are any comments or questions from members of the public with regard to the applications.
It's going to be me, and I hate being the person asking questions because I don't. This is mostly for the town. My name is Maggie Casella. I'm signing in, and I'm talking into the microphone. You know, I'm good at projection. They laugh. So I'm one of the abutters. I want to start by saying, Len Kuipers has been nothing but a lovely human being to me. Thank you. And answers my questions when I have them. So my questions aren't really for them. It's more for you guys. Because when I moved here 3 years ago from the city, yes, I'm one of them. I was running away from density. I grew up in a town half this size, and I've spent my entire life since I was 17 years old trying to get back to a town this size. So I'm density averse. So my questions are, yay, pit, wouldn't have bought the house if there was an active pit there anyway. So this is a great, that's great. I don't really want the lands to be industrial or that kind of thing. But I did speak to people at the office, the town office, several times, and I kept my notes about, what could happen down there, because honestly, 35 houses down there would make me sad, and I would sell my land and move away. And that's, again, I'm density averse. So I was told it was 150 acres. Is that true? But the original land, and it's split into 3, or am I, because the gentleman who was doing his presentation, I can't see Bubkiss, so I couldn't tell if it was east, west, and there was the retained land, which is the land where the water is, not Matson Lake, the mineral lake. So that's my first question. So what is the area around Bonn Road? Because when I looked at the thing that I got in the mail, it seemed that the retained land was so bad at this. So this is east, that's west. I apologize. North. So the north side is on White's Road, correct? Okay, so the land that's north of the 3 lots on the east side of Bonn Road, is that the retained land?
Yes. Okay,
so the last lot is on the end of Bonn Road?
Yes.
Score, okay, thank you. Bonn Road East, so that's very helpful. I also was told when I called the town that you get basically 3 bites at the apple, so that if it's 150 acres, you get to divide it 3 times. It's just stuck in my head. And then you get 3 bites at the 50 acres. Is that true, or did I write that down wrong?
We have a severance policy of 3 in a lifetime, 3 severances on a piece of land in a lifetime.
Okay, so that these 3 severances on east and west, that's it.
Right.
So the rest of that land, which is, how many acres is that left over?
The original slides were hectares.
Yeah, I know, but I can't think in yeah. But don't be sorry.
80 to 70.
Yeah, so there's these 3 sort of 1 acre or 1.5 acre. Again, I'm an acre kind of. I got it. He's got it. 60 acres. So that just sits there. Is that correct?
You're referring to the retained portion? Yes.
Okay.
Well,
I think I'm not being articulating correctly. So you guys are cutting 3 lots out of how much on the east side and 3 lots out of how much on the west side?
Because people who would be listening can't hear the answers,
Okay,
I'd appreciate if you could ask your questions and then we could have someone come up and prepare and provide the
yeah, that
answers
was,
if that's
that was
fair. So-
thoughtless of me. I apologize to
Not-
the people
no,
in the
it's-
cyber world. So my question is, so we have 3 parcels then, each 50 acres-ish. 2 parcels.
Yeah.
They're 75 and 75? How are you? Nice to see you. So they're 75 and 75. So the east portion, which is the one that I abut and the people in the back row abut, that is now split 3 times and that's it, we're done. And the pond basically stays the pond. I'm waiting for I'll take my answer off the air. I'm talking NPR now. God, that's such an American joke. So, I guess my question is, the one on the east side is how many acres? That's question number 1. You've cut 3 out of that, so that's the end. We're done. And then the one on the west side is 3 parcels out of that. And then whatever remains is done. So could I get an answer to that question, and I will cede the microphone.
Thank you, Maggie. So we'll get, Ron, are you going to answer those questions? No. Yes? Okay, thank you.
Get up.
So Maggie, I just want
I
to
was
say
just-
that those of us who grew up in Brighton also grew up in a community that was half the size,
know,
right?
right.
And so we are endeavoring to manage growth as best we can, knowing that it's coming our way and we need to manage it as best we can.
Listen,
I know
and
you get
I'd like to
that.
pay less taxes. So absolutely, let's,
Me too.
I understand that, and I'm certainly prepared for infrastructure and that kind of growth. Bear in mind, like what I'm talking about is high intensity development is, my preference is, that's what when I moved here, what I was trying to stay away from, which is why I picked the land, we picked where we live. That's all. Of course, grow, yes.
Mr. Warren, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to reiterate, if I get it correct, and if I don't, please, Mr. Lege, correct me as you see fit. On the east side, so the East Bonn Road parcel, I've got that it's originally approximately 68 acres. If you want acres or hectares, does it?
Acres helps me.
About 68. The 3 severed off lots will be, one's the large one at the bottom is a triangle. It's about 16 acres. And the other 2 are just larger than 2 acres and just shorter, just smaller than 2 acres, actually closer to 3 for the other one. It leaves about 50 acres as the retained parcel that has the feature up at the top towards White's Road.
And that just sits there.
That
Like,
just- that just
because
sits there.
because, and I'm directing that at these
Mm.
people, because they've taken that bite of those 3 lots out of that thing, that land is just retained and it cannot be divided again.
That is correct, but someone could build a house on it. Right.
Okay, I think that answers my questions. Thank you. Do you guys have any back there? I did it? I did it for everyone. Everyone can go home now. I adjourned this meeting. I'm kidding. I can't do that.
Unfortunately. Thank you, Maggie. I feel like we're holding a town hall meeting in Stars Hollow. Appreciate that, quite frankly. Are there any other members of the public with questions or comments? Members of council, questions or comments? Councilor Botwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Mr. Warren. Very quick question. There was reference to lifetime, once in a lifetime. What constitutes a lifetime?
Mr. Warren? Oops.
Through the chair, the simple answer would be, I don't know, because I've never heard it referred to as a lifetime. But I would say it's usually a generation, right? I don't know. Does it say lifetime in the official plan? I don't think that it does, so I wouldn't use that term.
Director Walsh?
Period.
That's generally accurate, except the only nuanced inclusion to that is at the time of official plan review, that can change.
Right.
Yeah, so all policies are up for review. Usually, when that official plan is reviewed by, for our purposes, by the county, who's the approval of our lower tier official plan, they may, just as the province has historically done, require that date that's in your official plan. So for us, a maximum of 3 new lots and retained since 2001, January 1st, 2001. Commonly, the county and or the province would say, keep that date when you update your official plan. So procedurally, it is kind of the lifetime. Yeah.
Right. Unless or until a council asks that their OP is changed. And so it could change through policy.
It could change, yes. And of course, that we could adopt a revised policy here and be subject to final approval by the county or the province, as the case may be.
Right. And at some point, these lands may enter into the urban boundary, in which case everything would change, although we would be looking at a generational timeline for that kind of thing to happen, or multi-generational timeline for that kind of thing to happen in this area of the community.
Right.
Right.
You know, yeah, another designation would mean different sets of policies. That's right.
Right. And also the province could come along and tell us, here's the new zoning. We've seen that happen too. Right. So our policies are our policies, and you know, we try to implement them as fairly and equitably as we can, but we live with other people's rules as well. So as does everyone else. So I hope that helps answer your question about what. Oh, pardon me. I'm looking at. It was Ms. Casella who brought up the original 3 and 10. I apologize, Councillor Botwell. Thank you, Madam Clerk. I hope that answers your question.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Someone said lifetime and my spidey sense went, whoa. There's got to be a definition for that word. So essentially, it could be 5 years or 50 or 150. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from members of council? Councillor Wright.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Lege, you at some point mentioned that there was noted some PHC-F2, some petroleum hydrocarbons. Was it enough that it needs to be mediated, or what will happen there?
Mr. Leger.
Through you, Mr. Chair, no further work was required to file the records of site condition. They have been filed and we have received them. So essentially, the province has deemed the lots to comply to their rules and regulations, and we're free to proceed with the development.
Okay, so that means that there's not enough there to be concerned about. Is that the idea?
According to the province,
Okay.
yes.
According to the province.
Councillor Freitas.
Through the chair, thank you. I'm not quite sure who to direct this to, but perhaps Director Walsh from Mr. Warren. Under agency comments, it indicates Lower Trent Conservation has expressed no objections, but has requested more time to review the documents circulated. And then it goes on to indicate no dwellings are proposed within the LTC regulated area. Hazard lands are within 60 meters of Matson Lake. Can you just kind of clarify why LTC would be asking for more time if it's not really within their scope? I'm a little puzzled.
Mr. Warren.
Thank you. Through the chair, while that response is, I think, true for the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment, the location of the 6 consents is outside of those, is definitely outside of the PSW, the Matson Lake PSW, but I think nobody had the time to provide me with any more details. And since there might be a development agreement that goes with the consent items, which there usually is for almost every consent, it was just in case they had any additional concerns. I don't think that they will, but it didn't slow anything down for them to be able to take another look at it as well.
Thank you both. Any other questions from members of council? Mr. Warren, do you have any final comments?
None at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. I will read the motion, but just let the members of the public know that tonight we will be receiving the report and directing staff to take into account the information and questions that were received tonight and provide a report back to council for future consideration. It's moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that council receives the report as prepared by staff regarding applications to amend the Municipality of Brighton official plan, zoning bylaw number 140/2002 as amended, and for consents intended for the creation of 6 lots, and that staff report back to council with a recommendation on the subject applications at a future meeting following additional feedback from the statutory public meeting and agency circulation. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. That brings us to item 6.3, a consent and rezoning application being B17-2023 on Smith Street. Purpose of the public meeting is to address requirements under the Planning Act for hosting a public meeting before council makes a decision and to obtain public input toward making any decision on the proposed consent. Mrs. Whiteman, by what method and on what date was notice of the consent applications given?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, notice of the consent was, am I clear? Was sent by regular mail, October 18th, 2023, to all property owners within 60 meters of the subject property. Notice was also circulated to all the agencies as required under the Planning Act. And in addition, a signed notice was also posted on the property on October 18th, 2023.
Thank you, Mrs. Whiteman. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed consent?
The purpose of the severance is to build a single dwelling on each of the lots, the retained as well as the severed lot, of approximately 0.97 hectares. And both will be 0.97 hectares.
Thank you, Mrs. Whiteman. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the proposed consent this evening? Any questions or comments from members of council? Any final comments, Mrs. Whiteman?
No further comments, Mr. Mayor.
Does council wish to make a decision on these consents this evening? Yeah, we're good. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that council receive the staff report dated 13 November 2023 regarding Smith Street consent application B17-2023. And further, that council grant provisional consent to application B17-2023 subject to the following conditions. Each condition shall be fulfilled no later than 2 years from the date of the mailing of the decision. At applicant's cost, sufficient land be conveyed by the registered transfer to the Municipality of Brighton along the frontage of Smith Road for widening of the road allowance to a minimum of 10 meters from the occupied center line, inclusive of any associated traveled areas, shoulders, or drainage works. The conveyance referenced in condition 2B above shall be clear of any liens or encumbrances, all to the satisfaction of the manager of operations. That prior to issuing a certificate of official, the manager of capital infrastructure shall indicate satisfaction with the applicant's site servicing and grading plan prepared by a professional engineer, inclusive of any required drainage easements. The drainage plan shall demonstrate no adverse impacts on adjoining properties, such that soil erosion or construction materials will be controlled on site. Post-construction drainage patterns will be same or similar to pre-construction patterns. No adverse impacts on adjacent properties occur from its construction or altered drainage patterns. Existing drainage constraints, if any, are mitigated. That the owner shall pay to the municipality cash in lieu of parkland an amount of $500. Prior to the endorsing of deeds for the severed lot, proof be lodged with the planning office that a hydrogeological report is completed by a qualified professional to the satisfaction of the municipality. Prior to the commencement of the hydrogeological report, a terms of reference shall be agreed upon between the applicant and the municipality. The recommendations of the hydrogeological study shall be implemented through a development agreement. All taxes on each of the lots be paid up to date prior to the issuance of a certificate of official. The OLS indicate in writing to the Department of Planning and Development that no encroachments of wells or septic systems will result from the lot addition conveyances. The surveyor deposits with the municipality a geospatial data file of the surveyed parcel fabric with respect to the severed and retained lands submitted to the satisfaction of the municipality. A digital copy of a registrable survey for the lots and the appropriate deed transfer be prepared and deposited with the municipal clerk. The owner provides to the municipality a registrable description on a deed conveying the severance lands for the use of the issuance of a certificate of official for consent. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Item 6.4, file is B17-2023. The address is 18 Elgin Street East. The purpose of the public meeting is to address requirements under the Planning Act for hosting a public meeting before council makes a decision and to obtain public input toward making any decision on the proposed consent. Mrs. Whiteman, by what method and on what date was notice of the consent application given?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, notice of consent of the application was sent by regular mail on October 23rd, 2023 to all property owners within 60 meters of the subject property. Notice was also circulated to all agencies required under the Planning Act. And in addition, a sign notice was also posted on the property on October 20th, 2023.
Thank you, Mrs. Whiteman. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed consent?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the purpose for the severance is to build a single dwelling on the newly created lot. And there is actually going to be a demolishment of the current building because it falls right on the new proposed lot line. And therefore, there will be another dwelling built on the retained parcel as well. So 2 single family dwellings on each parcel of the property.
Thank you, Mrs. Whiteman. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the proposed consent? None noted. Are there any questions or comments from members of council? None noted. Mrs. Whiteman, do you have any final comments?
No final comments, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Does council wish to make a decision this evening? I have a motion moved by Councillor Freda, seconded by Councillor Wright. The council received the staff report dated November 13th, 2023 regarding consent application B16-2023. And further, the council grant provisional consent to application B16-2023 subject to the following conditions. Each condition shall be fulfilled no later than 2 years from the date of the mailing of the decision, that a minor variance application be submitted after final approval of this consent, an application for demolition permit be submitted and approved by the chief building official, and that the house on the subject lands be demolished prior to the issuance of a building permit for the construction of a new dwelling on the subject lands. A deeming bylaw for Lot 8 and Lot 9 be passed by council to reflect that the subject lands were identified as separate lots on an original government plan. The applicant shall lay out and dedicate by deed to the required road authority to the satisfaction of the manager of operations a strip of land ensuring that it is commensurate with the planned width of Elgin Street at this location to an approximate width of 10 meters from the center line of the road occupation, free of any encumbrances. Cash in lieu of parkland in the amount of $500 is paid to the municipality. Applications for an entrance permit for the severed lot is submitted and approved by the municipality. An application for a municipal consent permit for the water and sanitary connections be submitted and approved by the municipality of Brighton. All taxes on each of the lots be in compliance with the municipal requirements prior to the issuance of a certificate of official. Digital copy of a registrable survey for the lots and the appropriate deed transfer be prepared and deposited with the municipal clerk. Geospatial data of the surveyed parcel fabric with respect to the severed and retained lands is submitted to the satisfaction of the municipality. And the owner provides the municipality a registrable description on a deed conveying the severed lands for use for the issuance of a certificate of official for consent. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Brings us 6.5, rezoning application, file Z07-2023, 26 Goodfellow Road. The purpose of the public meeting is to address requirements under the Planning Act for hosting a public meeting before council makes a decision and to obtain public input toward making any decision on the proposed application. Mrs. Whiteman, by what method and on what date was notice of the application given?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, notice of the subject application was provided in accordance with the Planning Act by regular mail on October the 3rd, 2023, to all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property. Additionally, a public notice sign was posted on the subject lands on October 11th, 2023. Notice was also circulated to all agencies as required under the Planning Act.
Thank you, Mrs. Whitman. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the subject application before council this evening?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the purpose of zoning bylaw amendment application Z07-2023 is to rezone the natural heritage features identified on the retained lands from the rural zone to the environmental protection zone to ensure the natural features are protected through appropriately restrictive zoning, and from rural zone to the rural exception number 65 zone to permit an entrance of 6 meters, and from the rural to the rural residential exception 55 zone.
Thank you, Mrs. Whitman. Are there persons present who have questions or comments with regard to the subject application? And there are none noted. Are there any questions or comments from members of council? I would just note that and ask, I guess, this is the result of a condition of severance, is it not?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, so that's why we're being asked to make a decision this evening, because we've already agreed to the consent. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or comments from members of council? Mrs. Whitman, any final comments?
No final comments, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wright, that council received the staff report dated November 13th, 2023, regarding zoning amendment application Z07-2023 for lands located at 426 Goodfellow Road, and that council enacts a bylaw to rezone a portion of the subject lands from rural zone to the rural exception 65 zone, from the rural to the rural residential exception 55 zone, and from the rural zone to the environmental protection zone. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Brings us to 6.6, draft official plan amendment, file OPA 01-2023, a policy amendment to section 3.8, Parks and Recreation, and a bylaw to establish parkland dedication. The purpose of the public meeting is to address requirements under the Planning Act for hosting a public meeting before council makes a decision on an official plan amendment. The Planning Act also requires a public meeting before passing a bylaw for establishing a parkland dedication bylaw. The statutory meeting is an opportunity to obtain public input toward making any decision on the proposed application. So, Mr. Walsh, by what method and on what date was notice of this application given?
Mayor and Council, notice of both applications, official plan amendment and the proposed parkland dedication bylaw, was given in Northumberland News website through a public paid notice ad. Note this is a difference from how our traditional practices have been by having it in the printed newspaper of the Brighton Independent, since it's no longer a newspaper. Manager Ron Warren mentioned that earlier as well. And that was done on October 10th of this year. And there was also, at the direction of council, on October 10th to give notice to interested parties, i.e. particularly the development community of record. So that was given by email, complete with the attachments that are found in the report tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. And would you please explain the purpose and reason for the subject bylaws before council this evening?
Mayor, the purpose of the official plan amendment is to establish new and revised policies to section 3.8 of the official plan dealing with Parks and Recreation. This came from a recommendation in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that was completed and accepted by council in April of this year. And that set of policies would give more clear direction as to what would be accepted for purposes of parkland, i.e. the standards and how they might be also developed through collaboration with the applicant. The draft parkland dedication bylaw, it's to expand the scope of conditions under which we actually collect parkland or payment in lieu of parkland, as the case may be. This bylaw is required before we're able to do it. Typically, we have only asked for 5% of land or payment in lieu for plans of subdivision, and $500, as we've heard tonight, for consent. So that's been the standard for many, many years. And so before we can change those things, Bill 23 amended through its Schedule number 9, the Planning Act, to require that we pass a parkland dedication bylaw, now subject to new provisions and specifications, prior to amending the traditional 5% or expanding the scope in which we ask for parkland dedications for instances of zoning bylaw amendments, official plan amendment, not official amendments, plan amendments, excuse me, zoning bylaw amendments, consents and building permits, as well as site plan control applications. So we'll need to track applications as to whether they've contributed in the past or not when issuing a building permit or considering a site plan. And it also applies to redevelopments, so that if someone has paid historically but now is intensifying the development site to result in more occupancy, then there'll be also a proportionate contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Are there persons present who have questions or comments regarding the subject application? Mr. Toby? And you have to scribe your name on that sheet in front of you, sir.
To before I go.
Yeah.
Stephen Toby, I'm owner, developer, builder, Gordon Toby Developments. Paul's a great guy to work with. He always brings up questions and concerns which we might have beforehand, gives us a chance to comment. And we did work with Paul. I met with him this past week, talk a little bit about some of the concerns we had with this new proposal. One of the things we always got to keep in mind, council loves to talk about affordability. And anytime we add a cost to a house as a developer, we just put another line on the spreadsheet. So this will be a few things that are proposed here. Will add some costs to houses. We did have comments which our office had prepared. We set them, and I think they're in your agenda package. So I want you to look at them seriously. Everything adds cost to a house. There's a few things, one specifically that I want to comment on, and that's with regards to the Butler Creek Trail. The Butler Creek Trail runs currently now through private property, which is owned by my corporation, from Cedar to Harbor Street. The intent of the municipality has always been to carry it on. So our developments have tied in with that trail system to make walking trails throughout the south end of Brighton. The goal is to be able to move from Gosport, from the south end of Brighton, from Brighton by the Bay Area, Raglan Street, all the way to town without specifically being on a road. You will be on a road part of the time. As we move through the municipality, we go on trails and off trails and between houses and those kinds of things. So it's a different kind of parkland than we're used to when we have playgrounds and lacrosse courts and those kinds of things. So the trail system, which we've been working on here for years, I mean, I've been sitting in this seat for longer than I've had gray hair, but is to connect one area of town to another, not necessarily make places where we have ball diamonds and that kind of stuff. And we're not against those, obviously, but in the south end of Brighton, we've been working on this. And my main concern with the whole thing is some of the trails that we put in fall on what we call environmentally sensitive lands. The conservation authorities are okay to run trails on them and that kind of stuff. But the problem I have right now with the way the legislation or Paul has proposed it is that we won't get full 100% credit on those. And I could understand that we wouldn't get full 100% credit on them if they weren't usable, but they are usable. So I'm going to use the LeBlanc property as an example. If everybody's just familiar with Brighton Meadows, Butler Creek Meadows. The current area which is being developed right now, I'm sure we've all driven down Cedar Street recently, has a trail network which will run on the south side and connect into a trail network, which I propose to go into our next development called Trailside Woods. So the name kind of makes what we want to do. But under the new proposed legislation, we would only be given credit of 20 or 25% for trails which fall in that area. So as a developer, that's going to mean I have to come up with land or I have to come up with cash. If I'm only getting 25% on a piece of property, I'm gonna add that to the bottom line. So I would suggest to you that those trail networks which we're creating are worth 100%. And if we don't make them worth 100%, that money's got to come from somewhere. So going back to Mr. LeBlanc's property, on the north side of the creek, there's a huge area there, which is all environmentally protected. It's a flood zone. I've walked and lived here and I've seen it flooded. You cannot put houses there. You can put parklands there, which will flood eventually. No loss of life, no loss of property. But if we don't get 100% on them, we're really not interested in doing that. So I suggest to you that we think about this 20 or 25% we're getting credit on. We'd like 100%, please.
Thank you, Mr. Toby. Are there any other persons present who have questions or comments? And Steve, I anticipate that that is clear in your documentation. Yeah, thank you. Any questions or comments from members of council? Mr. Walsh, any final comments?
Through the Mayor Council, just I just want to say there is a reference in the report about the 25% for trails. That was in response to some conversations with Mr. Toby. So it's not currently in the bylaw or the official plan. You'll see in the official plan policies there's reference to a recreational carrying capacity. That that in accepting some lands, if they are constrained, and Bill 23 uses the word encumbrances. I don't think it was really meant for environmental encumbrances necessarily, so much as infrastructure. But notwithstanding that, I think the idea of recreational capacity is important. That if lands to be conveyed have only partial recreational capacity, that of all the 20 different activities we entertain on our recreational lands, only a fraction of that is potentially there on the lands to be conveyed, then we have to reflect that in some way. Yeah, and that was fairly adamant by the consultant, and in the preparation of the master plan, there was some significant discussions with the consultant about this very topic, and that, and despite suggesting that there be maybe some apportionment, there was some discouragement by the consultant at that time. But since then, Bill 23 has come around. So it all comes down to activity level, activity days by people as to the value of the recreational property. And lastly, what buildings do we need and how much of that property can we put buildings facilities on outside of those environmentally constrained areas? So we're going to give that some thought in coming back with revised policies and bylaw in response to tonight. Just a note, it's in the bylaw that the effect of this bylaw, when finally passed by council, will be October 10th when it's first received. It's kind of like a first receiving date. But we can't, so that's really just the cutoff for when new applications come in, basically. It won't be fully in effect until the county approves the final official plan amendment by virtue of the Planning Act. I'll confer further with the county on that interpretations of the Planning Act, but I just thought I'd put that out there for people's references. And I just also wanted to mention that I want to acknowledge Mr. Brent Barnes. He was put on the first staff report. He did some major research and contributions towards the report and the OPA and the parkland dedication bylaw. So Mr. Barnes is here tonight as well, if there's any questions for him.
Thank you, Director Walsh, and thank you, Mr. Barnes, for your contribution to getting us this far, at least. And no doubt, your future contributions as you work through the comments that have been received so far. Any? Those were your final comments.
They were, except for these, and that is those. We have not received any more comments. And email went out to the development community just to confirm that comments have been received. So, which I had confirmation. So, other than Mr. Toby, it's been quiet in terms of the comments. You see that Bell and Rogers, et cetera, have all had no objections. Nothing from the school boards. Is looking to forward to hearing something from them, but nothing from them.
Thank you. I'll note that the motion before us again is to receive the report and to ask staff to take the information back and bring a report back for council's future consideration. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wright, seconded by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley, that Council receive the staff report dated November 13th, 2023, regarding the official plan amendment file number OPA 01-2023, a policy amendment to Section 3.8 Parks and Recreation, and draft parkland dedication bylaw, and that Council receive public comments during the public meeting session of the agenda and direct staff to return with a report in response to public comments. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Botwell, that Council move out of the statutory public meeting November 13th, 2023 at 7:42 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Brings us to our only staff report with regard to bylaw appointment, Committee of Adjustment members. Interim Deputy Clerk Polly, we have read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
No, I do not.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis, that Council receive the bylaw to appoint Committee of Adjustment members, staff report, and further that Council reappoints its current non-council committee members for the term of January 1st, 2024 to December 31st, 2026, or until such time that their successors are appointed. And further that Council appoint a member of Council to the Committee of Adjustment being blank for the term of January 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2024. And further that Council direct staff to bring forward an updated bylaw appointing such members for Council's consideration at the next available meeting. Who wants to be our Committee of Adjustment rep?
Who's the current rep?
I believe it's Byron. Yeah, it's Councillor Fredis. Any objections if I write down Councillor Fredis's name in the blank on this form? Did you have a comment? You may.
We just have to bring this forward through the Planning Act. This is something that we have to do. They have to give everybody an opportunity, I guess. That's the way it goes, but yeah. So that's the only reason why we brought it forward. We're not kicking you off.
There's nothing procedurally inappropriate about you seconding a motion that appoints you to a committee, but sometimes members of council don't wish to have their name moving or seconding an appointment. If you would like me to carry forward, I will. If you would like to remove your name as the seconder, I will find someone else. Very well, as am I. Any further discussion on the motion? Noting that I have added Councillor Fredis in the blank line on this motion. All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. We have no items for information purposes. We have nothing listed under unfinished business, which brings us to our one and only bylaw with regard to 426 Goodfellow Road. It's moved by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Butwell. The Council gives a bylaw. It's for second and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, to amend bylaw number 140/2002 as otherwise amended of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton, as it applies to the lands located at 426 Goodfellow Road, legally described as Concession 7 West Part Lot 33. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. That brings us to question period. Are there any members of the public who have questions with regard to anything that was on tonight's agenda? Anyone on Zoom? I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that Council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton planning meeting held on November 13th, 2023. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? And being none opposed, that motion is carried. And a motion moved by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that the November 13th, 2023 Council Planning meeting adjourn at 7:46 p.m. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Thank you, everybody.